property developing can be one of the most profitable strategies in Victoria.
But only if you do it right. We're about to give you some tips on how to maximise your return on investment.
First thing that you're going to step into is you've got to know your budget, right? So if you're going to be making a decision to go into property developing, what's your strategy? What is your borrowing capacity, right? There's no point if your borrowing capacity is at a small end going in and trying to find, a large parcel of land unless you can get the terms right. Many developers will look at to see what are their capacity. They'll have a chat with a broker. This is my income. What I'm looking at doing something. What could I potentially do, right? You either have some equity in your existing house. You might be able to tap into that. So get a bit of a framework to see what you've got to play with. The next step is obviously to go find that property. And if it's, the first time or one of your, if you're still new to the industry, I would suggest looking at doing something small. I wouldn't go in and do more than 4 units or, all that type of stuff, because it becomes a challenge. And you've got to, when you go into the gym, you don't just whack on 100 kg, plates on. You take it easy and you gradually get to that point. So, definitely first step is know sort of what strategy you're going to go into play. How much is your budget that you could play with? How much finances you've got to play with? And then you can then move to finding the right site for you. Finding the right site would entail a property in a right zone, no covenants or any major planning restrictions. Can you fit something at the back and keep it? Because the strategy there is, while you're getting the back unit, let's say you put one at the back, you still can rent the existing house, which then helps cash flow for your existing mortgage. So, there are many factors that you've got to take into consideration, but look at a property where it will tick your boxes for finances, but then also it won't overstretch you and just stress you out, because that's one thing that you've got to avoid. You don't want to be going in, property developing, and then after your first one, you're burnt out. It's like too stressful. You just gradually get to the stages that you want to get to. Now, property developing and subdivision, it can get you, a retirement earlier. It can get you choices. It can get you to get to the schools for your kids' education. It can give you those choices. But that's the end game. Start from the end game, reverse backwards, but start small, and then get your confidence and the muscle to get to that point.
Baby steps, right? Because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
So next I want to talk about smart design, right? So it's not about, your biggest return is not going to be always based on trying to squeeze as much as you can on the site. It's about being really smart and thinking about who are you going to sell these homes to. So I know that in some areas there are a lot of downsizes, so you might want to consider a single story home rather than a double story, because that's what empty nesters are looking for. And that's also going to cost you less to build single stories, and it's going to be quicker to construct. So it brings down all your holding costs, everything like that. So to think ahead and to think of that, do your research, call real estate agents, what's selling in the area, what do people want? That is one of the biggest things to get a good return on investment, is to research your market and to know who are you going to sell these to. If it's a 4-bedroom townhouse, is it better to take 1 bedroom away and put a larger retreat area for living space? Those sorts of answers you're going to get from researching the market, seeing what's been sold, what's sold at a good price, talk to your real estate agent to kind of get that information. smart design is just so important for a good return.
And a lot of things too is, we've got this tendency to try and, cram in as much as you can. And sometimes that works, sometimes it, like Beck said, it just doesn't work. I mean, if you're in an area where there's families and that's your, desirable, market where you're going to sell to young families, cramming in 3 bedrooms and, you've got a small, living area without a second living, it can be a challenge. A lot of people nowadays are working from home. So they'll need a little, office nook or, an area where they can just go do their thing. So, take those into considerations. Bedrooms aren't the only necessity anymore. Back in the day, people would say, oh, we want to, put as many bedrooms and away we go. Unless you're in sort of, a student accommodation environment or, something typical like that, that doesn't work anymore. You've got to attract the buyer, and the buyer now today has more options than most. And there's apartment living. Back in a generation or 2 ago, apartments weren't a massive thing. I mean, they were still around, but the Aussie dream was the big land and beautiful house. Now we're becoming more accustomed to that and open to apartment living. So my point is you've got to tick those boxes. And if you're doing apartments, if you're thinking about doing apartments in terms of developments, what's your amenities? You've got to now attract the buyer. You've got to tick the buyer's needs and wants. And today you're seeing a lot more in the health space where you're getting amenities like spas or saunas and red light therapies and all that type of stuff, because you have to attract the buyer. You've got to tick their boxes. And as a small developer, if you're going down that path, you've got to tick those boxes and you've got to know your buyer.
Okay, so financing is also very important for your return on investment. Maybe just take us through, what's required in terms of getting like the right accountant and the right mortgage broker and making sure everything is set up correctly. That's really important.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be, everyone's circumstances are different. Typically, if you don't have a good accountant, try and get some referrals from, people that you sort of look up to or that are doing okay, and they might refer you someone, a broker or an accountant. We're not going to give any, legal advice or financial advice here, but structuring the project is critical.
Yes.
In terms of tax minimization, as well as what's the end game. I mean, if you're wanting to build a dynasty, a legacy for your family in the future, how does that, what's the best way to structure that? So have those conversations. If you're not happy with your team, look out, have that conversation with people that you're looking up to or have the results that you're looking towards, and just ask, and you'll get, once you ask, you get what you want.
Yep, you really want to reduce your holding costs as well during your development. So if you have the right loan structure, like all of this, support and help that you get from others is going to help you financially. So it's really important that you do that research and you find the right people to be around you.
Yeah, and I'm just going to touch on also, like I mentioned in the past, where a lot of developers they'll go to the major four and they'll say, this is what I want to do, but the major fours will have so many hurdles, right, to do with the property development. So a lot of people just don't do it because they're just disheartened. The bank said no, or whatever. There are other tiered financial institutions that can help you. You will pay a little bit more, you will pay establishment fees and a little bit higher interest rates, but the project gets started and it can finish, right? So definitely look outside the box, look at all options, not just the majors, look at all options, because your key is to try and build the momentum, right? So that you can get to your end game, whether it's earlier retirement or, you know, family vacations, or, you know, helping the kids with their education, you know, or life choices, whatever it is for you. Get the momentum, start as quick as you possibly can, and just keep that momentum going. And sometimes you do have to take a clip in terms of interest, pay a little bit more, but the project gets started and completed.
The next thing I want to talk about is timing. So don't underestimate timing. When you sell is obviously going to make a huge effect on the return that you make. So I guess our advice when it comes to timing is be prepared. Get your plans and permits in place so that you are not in a position where you're desperate. You can sell at the right time because the ball is in your court. You know, it can sometimes take 6, even 12 months at worst to get plans and permits done. So if you're, you know, on the ball straight away and you're getting that prepared, then when the market is at, you know, a great time, then you're ready.
Yeah.
You're ready to sell. You're ready to either construct yourself and sell, or you're ready to sell to a builder or a developer who wants to come along and start straight away. You know, if you're selling your property and you don't have those plans and permits yet, it's not that ideal to a builder or a developer because they have to wait.
Yeah.
So to have them ready to go so that when the timing is right and the market is doing great,
Definitely.
you're ready.
Yeah, definitely. And touching on to that, adding on, as a developer, you got to, you know, you're aiming for minimum 20% ROI. If you've got the plans and permits, and that's typically a 2-year process, the 20%, you know, minimum. If you've got plans and permits and you press the button to sell, a developer will look at it, you know, anywhere between that 10-15%, right? So that balance of that 5 or 10%, that's in your pocket. So ultimately, why we encourage getting plans and permits is simple. You're adding value to your property, which is always a bonus. Yeah, it's always positive in that regards. You're adding value. That's how you make money in property. You have to add value. If it's a renovation, you got to, you know, you might do a reno, you might put in an extension. You're adding value, right? So if you've got a property or an investment, add value. And plans and permits are a strategy to add value. So once you've got the plans and permits, you got minimum 2 years to, you've got 2 years to commence. If you don't commence, you can always extend it, all right? So like Beck mentioned previously, when the market is, you know, hot and, you know, development's just going crazy and just flying off the shelf, then you're in a position with the cards and you can sell at a premium, all right? You don't have to start as soon as you get your permits. And like I said, you can always extend at least once or twice if you don't start within that 2 years.
Okay, so and then one more thing that I want to touch on in terms of your return on investment is the design features and the materials that you're putting in the home. So if you're developing in a low income area, you obviously aren't going to want to invest a lot in your materials because you're not going to see that return back. But if you're in a fairly, you know, nice high income area or mid to high income area, you're going to want to start to think about investing in materials because you've got to think about all the competition in your area and what the other developments look like, because when the buyer's coming out and it's a difference between yours and another one, they're going to want to walk into a home where they feel like they're getting great value for where they are. So if people are in a mid to high income area, they're going to like nice things and they're going to like nice materials. So it's in your best interest that you invest a little bit in your interiors so that you can capture that buyer and excite that buyer. It's not always about keeping costs low. It's about being smart with your money and smart with your investment. Because if you're expecting a good return because you're in a good area, you have to put in that work, you have to put in that effort to make that home look at that value that you're hoping to get.
Yeah.
And finally, I'm just going to touch on, once again, and we've said it before in some of our other videos, on building your A-team. If you want a good return on investment, you have to have the right support around you, people who are going to advise you, help you, strategize with you. All of that that's what a developer's job is building that A team, having the right accountant, the right mortgage broker, the right conveyancer, the right team to look over your subdivision and project manager, the right builder if you're constructing. So it really is about building that team and that level of support to help you strategize so that you know your numbers, you know what needs to be done, and you have people who can execute it for you. And that's a huge part of getting a really good return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
To get a good return on investment, subdivisions are all about a smart strategy.
Thanks for listening, guys. All the best.
And until next time, happy developing.